What's up, everybody? Marvel Cross 316 back with another comic book flashback. Today we are looking at Ultimate Spider-Man issue number 14, and we're looking at the first appearance of Dr. Octopus in this series, the villain Dr. Octopus. Now, we know that Dr. Octopus was working for Norman Osborn in this universe, but we're wondering what happened to Dr. Octavius, and we're going to find all this out, all this information in this issue. But we begin today's story here. We have Peter Parker in class. It looks like it's a math class, but it's not really focusing on math. Instead, the teacher wants people in 1 week, to show up as a superhero. And this catches Peter Parker's attention here. They basically got to give a presentation in front of the class saying what is their superpower, who are they um, representing. Basically, they could be one of the superheroes like Spider-Man or Captain America or even a mutant. She brings up the fact that they can even show up as a mutant. And so Peter Parker looks at Mary Jane. We know from last issue that Peter Parker revealed to Mary Jane that he is Spider-Man, and so she's the only one in the class that knows Peter Parker's secret. And so we see here that, again, the teacher says you can even be a mutant if you want to. And that's going to be a little bit of the focus of this issue today. We're not really focusing on the X-Men per se, but we see that basically this is going to catch the students' attention here. Kong asks a question here. He says, "Do we have to like come in costume?" And the teacher says, "No, you don't have to, but you can if you want to. It's a presentation. Creativity is a plus. You can bring anything you want to." And so we see Flash Thompson and Kong go back at it, and Kong says, "Yo, can Flash come in a dress because he's been waiting to ask?" And then Flash says, "Oh, that's stupid." And then the teacher calls out Kong saying, "You can bring anything you want, Kong, but you better bring your brain for this one. You can't afford another grade like the one you got on last week's quiz." And Flash is like, busted. And so as the class continues, now we're going to see what happened to Dr. Octavius. We know, like I said in the beginning, Dr. Octavius was working for Norman Osborn. We know that there was an explosion in or basically at Osborn Industries, and that's how Norman Osborn became the Green Goblin. But what happened to Dr. Octavius here? Well, we see here that there's a bunch of medical doctors here. They're working on Dr. Octavius here. And what we're going to learn here is that Dr. Octavius has been in a coma for 3 months. And all of a sudden, while these two guys are talking to each other, we see Dr. Octavius start to mumble to himself. And he's like, "Oh, why did you just call me that?" They just called him Dr. Octopus. It was just like a silly name that they called him, but this name is going to stick, as we soon see. And he's offended by what they just called him. And we see here that because of that explosion, Dr. Octavius has control of these metal arms here. And so he said, "Why did you call me Dr. Octopus?" And so we see, oh my goodness, look at what just happened. The metal of what he was wearing, these tentacles, they've been grafted into his skin. And so pretty gruesome stuff here. We see that at Midtown High School, there's going to be a pep rally. And we see here that everybody's all, they're going to be pumped up here. But we see that Mary Jane's not really looking forward to a pep rally, but she's just glad to be in company with Peter Parker, as we'll soon find out. So this is where the conversation begins with this topic of mutants. And we see that Kong is one of the first ones that brings it up, really saying that he feels like he is basically under fire here. He thinks that all these people who are becoming superheroes, they're taking over the world, and these normal guys are just going to have to fight for their lives here. And so all this big discussion continues to take place here. And he says, "What do y'all think?" And he said, "Do you think it's like that Ghostbusters movie where ghosts start to fly around and everybody's looking at Kong like he's a big nut here, but he's like, I'm serious, y'all. I mean, look at what's going on in the news. All these superheroes are popping up out of nowhere. And I said, is humankind in danger here? So while they're talking, and we see that Peter Parker gets offended here, and he says, you do something, keep an eye out. That's what the Germans said about the Jews. And then Kong says, well, yo, the Jews never had big red laser beams shooting out of their eyes, I think. And Peter Parker says, oh, come on. And so they're continuing to talk. All of a sudden, a very familiar looking girl begins to talk. She's blonde headed, good looking. I guess you can kind of guess who this is, but she's going to chime in here. It looks like she's probably a senior, but we see here that she starts to tell everybody about how, yeah, that's true, superheroes are popping up out of nowhere. But I think what we're going to have to really focus on here is that your talents are actually your superpower. So if you can play guitar, you can play football, math, whatever you do, whatever makes you you, that's your power. And she said that's what we're going to have to focus on. And if you can't use your power, then you just ain't going to make it in society. And so, pretty philosophical stuff from this girl. And we kind of find out who she is, as Kong says, who are you? And it just so happens to be Gwen Stacy. We're now going to see the first appearance of Gwen Stacy in the Ultimate Universe. And she looks to be a whole lot different than the Amazing Spider-Man version of Gwen Stacy. So back at this lab here with Dr. Octavius, he's still trying to figure out where he's at. He has these bandages over his eyes, and he's getting impatient with these guys. And we see that one of the guys that's there is Dr. Henry Pym, and you can guess who that is. That is the Ant-Man. And we see here that Dr. Pym is trying to just calm down Dr. Octavius, but Dr. Octavius is continuing to get more impatient as they're just not basically answering his questions. And he says, Osborn, how long? How long was I in a coma? And Dr. Pym says 3 months. And he said, oh my, I don't remember what happened. I can't think right. And he said, what have you done to me? And so they could have taken those tentacles off of him, but they wanted to see what would happen. It was like a lab experiment. And Dr. Octavius is definitely getting annoyed here. So at the pep rally, we see all what's going place, here with Let's Go Seniors and all this. I can't hear you sophomores, all this taking place. And as the cheering continues to take place, Peter Parker and Mary Jane's hands continue to get closer to each other, and they actually touch, so they're holding hands now. So again, like I said in last issue, a relationship is starting to develop between the two. So back at the laboratory now, we see that more confusion is taking place, and Dr. Octavius is getting more annoyed. He gets up and he tells them to take his bandages off, basically that blindfold. So they do, and he looks at what's happened to him. All the skin has been grafted to these metal arms, and he just gets mad. And look at so angry, the angry face of Dr. Octopus here. And Dr. Octopus has had enough, and he says, I said be quiet. And so then his mechanical arms let loose, killing these doctors here, as we can see with this big thunk. Pretty gruesome stuff. And Dr. Pym, I think, is the only one that's going to make it out. And he said, now, tell me where I am. And so now we're going to focus on Kong here. He's at his house. He's looking at a Maxim magazine, Patsy Walker. And his mom says, Clifford, honey, I'm going out. And he says, whatever. And then he starts to think about the class from today. He's saying, his teacher saying she wants the students to come dressed as a superhero or whatever. And then he starts to think about these weird instances with Peter Parker and how he broke his desk that time, as well as how Peter Parker was bitten by that spider. Then he thinks about Spider-Man and how he started out as a wrestler. And then he notices how Peter Parker was good at basketball. He noticed how Peter Parker at one time was getting beat up by bullies, but then he was able to take down bullies by himself. There's that spider bite. Is there a connection between the spider bite of Peter Parker and Spider-Man? And so we end the issue here with Kong thinking, maybe there is a connection. So we're going to have to worry about that next issue. Does Kong suspect that Peter Parker is Spider-Man? We're going to find all this out in issue number 15. Hope to see you there. And until next time, keep reading comics.